The views, ideas, and content of WellSeekers and their guests are their own opinions, and you should always seek additional professional help around any of the issues discussed here on WellSeekers.
Hello and welcome to WellSeekers, where we are giving you the keys to rise and come back and thrive in today's complicated world to help you find your story of well from the mind down. I'm Lucia and I'm so honored to be here with you today. On today's show, we are talking about one of my favorite topics, which is why we have the show Lucia at Night, which is all about relationships. But this was a topic that we thought, should we do a Lucia at Night or should we do a WellSeekers? And I think that this fits really well with WellSeekers because we're doing a series right now on mindfulness. And what that means in today's complicated world of 2021, or maybe you're listening in 2022. This episode is going to air in 2022, but we recorded it at the end of 2021, just a little behind the scenes look. But what does mindfulness mean, and how does it play into not only our mental, emotional health, but all other aspects of our holistic health, right? Our personal development, our families, our friends, our career, and of course, our love life, right? What does mindfulness have to do with love? What does mindfulness have to do with sex? I love talking about the connection between mindfulness and sex. There's a bigger, broader conversation between mindfulness and love. And that's the conversation we're going to have today. Not only just talking about mindfulness and sex, but what does it mean to bring mindfulness into your relationship? It's a concept that when I first learned about it, when I started getting into mindfulness and meditation and how to bring it into aspects of my life, and I started reading about what does it mean to be fully present, fully aware within the context of relationship. I have to admit, that is the hardest area for me. It's not necessarily when it comes to sexual intimacy, but when it comes to intimacy in the sense of communication, intimacy in the sense of all the other aspects of relationship, right? What it means to be fully present when you're in the kitchen doing dishes with somebody, what it means to be fully present when you're making the selection and choice of who you're even wanting to be with, right? There are all these little pockets in love and relationship where mindfulness is so important and so key, right? I think sometimes we confine the conversation of mindfulness to a yoga mat or to a meditation block. And we don't think about how can we expand this into every crevice of our holistic health. That's what the series is all about, right? With food, with career, with family, with everything. So if we're talking about everything, we have got to talk about love, right? So on today's show, I am so excited to welcome our guest, Lisa Rachel Snyder. She is a Tantric Intimacy Coach. What does that mean? Lisa's going to tell us. We're going to talk about how to bring mindfulness into your love life, how to bring mindfulness into intimacy, and what that all means. How do we get there so that we can thrive in this complicated world? We are going to find out next when we are joined by our guest, Lisa Rachel Snyder. We'll be right back with Lisa right here on WellSeekers.
You're listening to WellSeekers, a show where the journey is just as important as the destination.
Welcome back to WellSeekers. I'm so excited to welcome this week's guest, Lisa Rachel Snyder. She is a Tantric Intimacy Coach and intuitive astrologer who guides strong spiritual humans to fulfillment in love, sex, relationships, and life. A yoga teacher, public speaker, and founder of the Sex Empress Academy, Lisa's tantric embodiment practices have profoundly transformed her own health, both mentally and physically, and she teaches to share what she loves with other people. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today on WellSeekers.
Thank you so much for having me, Lucia. So I have a producer on the show, and we were prepping topics, we thought about tantric embodiment, essentially, to talk about and bring it into mindfulness. But I think we need to address first, and we were talking about this briefly before we started recording, when people hear tantric, I know, because I was sharing with a friend too, I think sex immediately. And her response was, oh, are you talking about sex? Right. So can you explain to people more about the holistic components?
Yeah, so that's a really common misconception. And it's true that Tantra involves sex. So what I love about Tantra is it's essentially saying yes to all of life. It's saying that everything is divine. So even the aspects of ourselves that we tend to shame or reject or make wrong, and like a lot of spiritual traditions do this, don't be angry, don't be upset, like transcend the dark, right? And I'm not my body. I like it's a lot of these spiritual traditions are helping us to not identify with the body and not identify with the lower vibrations, which is great. And there's an element of that to Tantra, but at the same time, we are living in these bodies and we are experiencing these emotions. And so rather than reject them and make them wrong, Tantra is saying it's all divine and we can work with them in a way where it's supporting a more fulfilling life. And so sexuality is included in that. Sexuality is something that a lot of spiritual traditions sort of shame and reject. And Tantra is saying, no, the body is divine. Sexuality is divine. Rage is divine. I love rage as in particular because rage is like letting you know that your boundaries are being crossed. And so if you reject it, if you make it wrong to feel rage, then you bury that emotion. And what ends up happening is it gets stuck in the body. It makes you passive aggressive and bitter. It causes depression. It causes health problems, or it comes out and explodes and burns bridges because that energy it has to go somewhere, as opposed to if you're embracing something like rage, then when you start to notice like, oh, I'm starting to feel some rage. Oh, I'm letting my boundaries be crossed. Oh, like I'm not okay with this. I need to honor myself and honor my no. And it's the same with sexuality. Tantra is just saying that everything is divine. And again, with sex, like when you recognize sex as sacred, then you start to approach it from a mindful perspective, from a much more conscious perspective. It becomes an act of love, true lovemaking, rather than something you're going through the motions doing, or something that you're doing to fill a void or whatever. It just becomes this deeply sacred practice and a spiritual practice. And it's a gateway to your higher self, to enlightenment, to, bliss, ecstasy, all of those things.
Lisa, I want to ask about how we get there, because that does sound divine, right? To have that in our sexuality, in the act of sex, right? To incorporate that. I want to ask you a little bit about how we get there. But first, could we take a step back and just briefly, could you share a little bit about where this philosophy actually comes from? Because a lot of people associate it with Sting, I feel like, because he talks so much. Yeah, Sting the artist.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's interesting. I didn't know he talked about Tantra.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. He used to talk about it all. And maybe it's just for like exennials that think that, and millennials, but whenever I've mentioned it, it's like, oh, what Sting does. Because he used to talk about it all the time. But can you tell us a little bit about, just briefly, where it does come from?
It comes from India. And it's gone through many, many iterations over the centuries. But The version of Tantra that is most prevalent right now came from Osho, and he sort of translated it in a new way. And since then, there have been birthed a lot of like neo-Tantra sects, which is sort of like where I fall in. My approach to Tantra is it's very much like embodied. So I have done trainings and I've taken courses and studied. What I teach is it's just in my being. Like I just get it. So it's not something that is coming from a book. It's not coming from, and this is one of the things I love about Tantra is that it's not a religion. It's a way of being. It's an approach to life. And so, the way that I teach it is very much from an embodied understanding. I've received a lot of information from my own higher guidance and like plant medicine journeys, and then also some initiations that life has taken me through that had me to face some of the less appealing parts of myself that taught me a deep, profound self-love, which is essentially what it's all about. Because, you know, it's, as I said, it's recognizing everything is divine. So therefore, every part of yourself is allowed to exist.
Yeah, I love that concept of every part of you is divine, because it really does cross all religions, right? How you say it's not a religion, but it crosses all religions, right? Because most religions would honor that concept as well, right? That every part of you is divine, right? Regardless of the root of that. I love that it is something that you can bring into your life regardless. If we take those concepts in theory, Lisa, and move it into relationship and sex, right? How do we take those and apply them to how we play out in our own lives and in relationship? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So relationships start with the relationship with ourselves. On some level, every relationship that you have is a reflection of your relationship with yourself.
So if we translate that to relationship, that makes total sense. In sex, how does that work, Lisa?
Yeah. So sex is an opportunity to connect with God, to connect with your higher self, to connect with true love in all its forms. Because when you're having sex, and I assume we're talking about sex with another person, because the same thing can happen by yourself.
Yeah.
But with another person, you enter a space of timelessness and a space of egolessness. And that's what creates, I mean, that's love itself. That is what love is like that level of presence. And sex is so magical because you're bringing that level of presence to your body as well. And through Tantra, through a lot of the techniques that I teach, you can run that energy through your entire body and have full body orgasms, not just by yourself, but with another person, the two of you together creating this incredible amount of like ecstatic, blissful, pleasurable energy together. And it's mind blowing, honestly. But it comes from, first of all, not rejecting yourself, like bringing the fullness of yourself to that experience and exposing that with another human where you're both doing that and connecting with a deep, deep self-love. That's what opens you up to have that kind of experience. And so there are techniques, there are breathing techniques, there are techniques for moving energy and that sort of thing. And sometimes we do that, but the majority of the focus is on loving all aspects of yourself, coming into a profound sense of self-love where you're no longer rejecting your shadows. You're working with your shadows. They become integrated. You become confident for who you are, not who you're expected to be. You release the people pleaser. You start just showing up in the fullness of you. You embrace your sexuality. You embrace your power. You don't worry about other people rejecting you because you're not rejecting yourself. You align with your purpose. You align with your mission. You become magnetic to people who are in a similar vibration with you. You find your soul family. It's like all of these things start happening. Your whole life starts aligning to the vibration of love and pleasure and fulfillment through Tantra, through these techniques that I teach. It's like, it honestly changes your life dramatically, as it has for me.
So I hear is when you mindful, again, just to bring in, because mindfulness is just the epicenter of this, right? It's like starting from what are the thoughts that are tripping me up from being fully present to myself. And then when I can fully show up for myself through the methods that you're talking about, then I can bring my full self into relationship and combining that hopefully with someone else, right, who has raised their vibration and is able to step into their full self. That is the power of relationship and really the power of intimacy, it sounds like as well.
Yeah. And you used the word hopefully bring someone into your life. And I would argue it's not even a hopeful thing. It's like once you do this, you automatically become a vibrational match. It's like the universe just supports you in attracting the people who are meant for you, or that partner who is meant for you. When you have come to a place of integration and self-love that is open to that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And is my experience as well. You're not going to match with somebody or feel a match in any way if you're operating on a different set of guiding principles, really, right?
Yeah.
And I know you use the word vibration. I think vibration as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Lisa, if people want to learn more about your programs and what you do, how can they find out more about your upcoming programs?
I have a group program for women coming up in November called the Sex Empress Academy. And this is a tantric activation to really become that irresistible and untamed divine feminine that is creating fulfillment in love, in sex, in intimacy, and in her life in general. So that's a 6-week program. And that is really including all of my favorite juicy techniques and concepts, tantric concepts. It's a lot of embodiment practices. It's a lot of breath work. It's a lot of empowerment. It's sexual awakening. It is feeling your emotions, your rage, your sensuality. It's a really powerful program. That's coming up in November, and you can learn more about that on my website, which is lisarachelsnyder.com. And I also work one-on-one with both men and women. If you want to actually go even deeper, then you can reach out to me as well.
Lisa, I feel like we need to have you back sometime because there's so much more to talk about, but I do want to respect your time. So before we let you go, just one more question. Why do you feel like this work is so important? Because I feel like sometimes people are like, this is, I'm in my pace, I'm in my life, and there's no way to change it. There's no way to shift it. Right? Why do you feel like this work is so important for someone who does feel like there is more, but maybe is a little trepidatious to start the journey?
To me, this is what shifts it. Honestly, I have full body chills as I'm talking about this, because in my own journey, I was a yogi for many years and doing all of the mindfulness practices and meditating regularly. And I still found myself stuck in self-sabotaging behaviors. I had an eating disorder, and I was dating emotionally unavailable men and like jumping from all of these different toxic relationships. And I just couldn't seem to break through those patterns, no matter how much I meditated, no matter how much yoga I did. And it wasn't until I found Tantra and actually started embracing and integrating these darker parts of myself and learning to work with them and learning to love them and really coming into my power and reclaiming my sexuality, my sexual power as a woman, that everything started to shift. And so to me, this is the key: shadow work, Tantra, recognizing all aspects of you as divine. This is really when you start to unhook from those deep, deep rooted patterns that are holding you back from the life of pleasure and fulfillment that you truly desire. And not only desire, but actually came here to experience. This is your birthright. It is your birthright. Desire is a compass. Desire is what is letting you know that this is what's meant for you. And so if you're not experiencing your desires, and I'm talking about desire on like a deeper level, it's not like it's not the kind of the desire that's trying to fill a void. Like, I desire this cookie or whatever. It's a desire that is like a deep, like soul yearning, like the desire for partnership, divine union, the desire for children, maybe the desire for a career that makes an impact. Like these types of desires, these are your soul guiding you towards what is meant for you. And if you're not experiencing them, then there's something that is blocking that. And that's where Tantra comes in. And that's where the work that I do is what clears that away so that you can really step into your power and your greatest fulfillment.
It's beautiful. I think that's the perfect place to leave it. Lisa Rachel Snyder, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We'll have all her links below so you can get in touch with Lisa. And we'll be right back on WellSeekers.
Today's lifestyle demands the best in wireless, and with Pulse Cellular, you have the best options available. Switch to Pulse Cellular for unlimited talk, text, and high-speed data, coast to coast with no contracts, no credit checks, and no overage fees. One line for $65 or 4 lines for just $45 each, including hotspot, Wi-Fi calling, and 50 gigs per line. And for all you travelers, we got you covered in Canada and Mexico. Plus, text and data in over 210 countries worldwide, all with the best phones or bring your own. That's pretty awesome. Get the best user experience on mobile at pulsecellular.com.
Thanks for being part of the Seekerhood. We couldn't do this without you. Now, back to the show.
Thanks so much again to our guest, Lisa, for joining us. What a powerful conversation. I'd love to have Lisa back to talk about some of those. I know we went into a lot of different areas. I'd love to get deeper into some of the specific areas we were talking about to see how mindfulness can be brought in an even deeper way. So thank you, Lisa, for sharing your personal story and for sharing that wisdom with us. We love continuing the conversation. So if you're not friends with us yet on online, make sure to find us. We are on Instagram at WellSeekers. We're on Twitter at WellSeekers. We're everywhere at WellSeekers. You can also find me at Lucia Naz. We love to talk about it all outside of the show. So please, please, please feel free to reach out. What's that? If you didn't understand me, because I think I stuttered a little, that was please, please, please. Please, please, please feel free to reach out. I would love to connect with you, love to talk with you. And if you have questions for us, we are going to be starting a new segment of Q&A. So we would love to hear from you. From all of us here at WellSeekers, thank you so much for being a part of our family. Thank you so much for taking the time. We know that especially in 2022, there are so many choices and so many voices, and we are just so glad and honored that you have taken the time to spend it with us, to hear the stories, to hear the solutions, to hear the sage advice, and to hear what's going on that you can use in your busy and wonderful world of 2022. So thanks for being with us, and thanks for being a part of my journey and my family here at WellSeekers.
How would you like to join the conversation? Email us anytime at hello@wellseekers.com.